why does Gottheimer have this particular chip on his shoulder? I mean, you write that he had an intense hostility to the left wing of the party. He dubbed them the Herbal Tea Party, which is kind of hilarious. I hadn't heard that before. The Herbal Tea Party. Okay. It considered the progressive movement generally to be poisoned by anti-Semitism, but he had a particular animosity toward Tlaib and Omar. The pair were far too rough to Israel in their rhetoric, he complained, taking his beef to Majority Leader Hoyer on the House floor. Now, I am inclined to believe and to take the view that that is not a good faith reading of the nature of Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib's comments. I would not frame them as anti-Semitic, and I wouldn't frame them as anti-Israel. I would frame them as pro-Palestine, frankly. But what is it that's driving Gottheimer to have this particular bee in his bonnet, not just about those two Congress members, but about criticisms of Israeli policy in particular? And it seems from what you've written here, the left more broadly.
Yeah, this was a big thing for him, and he's such a central character, not just in this book, but in this whole kind of antagonism around this issue. He comes out of you know Mark Penn? Do you know the
like the actor,
that crazy figure? No, that's Sean Penn.
I'm sorry, Mark.
So Mark Penn's this
Penn,
this legendary rat fucker who was like the like devil on Bill Clinton's shoulder. Like during the 90s, he was this notorious pollster figure. Today, he and his wife run No Labels. He goes on Fox News all the time. He's had a very lucrative career. But he's known as like a dirty trickster. And Gottheimer was his intern back in the Clinton administration and became his mentor, and he followed him through all of his work in and out of, he would go back and forth between private business, Microsoft, and then back into the government. And like in 2008, for instance, Mark Penn was Hillary Clinton's kind of chief campaign strategist, and wrote the famous memo that said, we have to paint Obama as un-American, and we need to own American. And the Obama campaign assumed that every dirty trick that was played, whether it was Jeremiah Wright stuff, whether it was sending out photos of him in like African garb, whether it was all the other rumors about Obama that would be circulated, they all thought they came from Mark Penn, but were executed by Gottheimer, who was also on Hillary Clinton's campaign. Gottheimer was just a guy at the time, like Obama was embraced by what existed of a nascent kind of left. And like Gottheimer just hated them. Like it was a constant war with them. The irony being that immediately afterwards, he wrote a book, Gottheimer did, where he collected all of Obama's speeches together and wrote an intro and published it. And called it Obama's speeches or something like that. And
as pure just mercenary money grab, or because he had changed his mind about Obama? Or?
No, it was a mercenary money grab. We looked it up though. It sold like less than 1,000 copies or something. So it didn't even work as a money grab. But if you want to make any of the Pod Save Bros or any Obama era people like curse, like just mention Gottheimer, and also mention that book. To screw over in a toxic way your opponent the entire way through, and then wrap it up by taking all of his speeches and publishing it as your own book, is just incredible. So he then goes in and out of government. He goes to the FCC while Federal Communications Commission, while Mark Penn is at Microsoft, and has a big case before the FCC. He then leaves the FCC and joins Mark Penn over at Microsoft. They then start their own public relations firm, which does a ton of work with Saudi Arabia. And they become like a gigantic vehicle for Saudi Arabian influence in Washington. The firm Burson Marsteller, which even Rachel Maddow described as like when like evil dictators need representation, they go to like Burson Marsteller, and Mark Penn is the founder, and Gottheimer key staff on there. And so then when he finally runs for Congress in 2016, that's his background. Just like the most possible corporate background, where you're relying constantly on government corruption in order to make money, plus working for Saudi Arabia. Plus he had always been kind of a pro-Israel activist throughout his career, like whether it was college and on. And he runs in a swing district in northern Jersey and unseats a Republican. And his big fear was always getting called too far to the left, or he was always afraid that like the tiny little progressive areas of like Teaneck or whatever, like the liberal areas of northern New Jersey would undermine him and make him look like an herbal Tea Party member. So you put all that together, and he just has this visceral hostility to, like, it feels like more than 50% of the party. Like not even just the squad, but to him, the squad kind of, and particularly the two Muslim members, epitomized everything that he feared about the party.
That additional context of how he apparently spearheaded the Obama and Muslim Guard photo leak, or the moment where Hillary Clinton was asked, "Do you think Barack Obama is Muslim?" And she goes, "I don't know. You have to ask him." Right. I have not forgotten how she affirmatively, actively lost my vote in 2008. I wasn't by any means in the bag for Obama at the beginning of that election season, but
it was him and Mark
rabidly
Penn.
Islamophobic.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, are we dancing around? I mean, if he was behind all of, if not a lot of that, and then also immediately is targeting these, seeming to want blood from these two Muslim Congress members the second they step into Congress. I mean, we're talking about something that happened within the first 2 months of their first term, right?
Yeah.
Days, do you think he's being? Yeah. Would it be fair to say that there's also a credible argument that there's Islamophobia driving this?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
At that point, what can you even attribute it to? Because you haven't done anything yet, really.
Right. Except you tweet that there are active lobbying efforts that are not in the interest of the American people, per her view. So you go on to write about how DMFI is created partly in the wake of Citizens United because it can have a slightly different functionality from AIPAC and also be distanced from some of the bad reputation that AIPAC had picked up over the years. Talk to us a little bit about how DMFI came to be and what different kind of a role it could play than AIPAC.
Yeah, AIPAC's strength is similar to the NRA in the sense, and any like really good lobby group, that they're extremely well organized, that they've got regional political directors, deputy regional political directors, and then every campus is organized, every town is organized, every city, every state. And that means that you can move on a dime, and that, if there's an issue that comes up, you can have, 200 meetings with members of Congress, with people who are active in the community. And that's what members of Congress really care about. Money obviously is, number one, because without that, you're not getting through the door, but you need people too. And to be able to say, like, I live in your district, I have 10 people that want to come meet with you. We 10 represent, hundreds and hundreds of people in this area. And we also we're talking to the local news. They're going to do an article about this. So it has this exponential kind of leverage to it. And so that and then marshaling financial resources into different districts to punish people who strayed from the pro-Israel line, those are like the two keys to AIPAC's real power. And so and being bipartisan, like being, Chuck Schumer, Steny Hoyer, et cetera, like having deep connections with both parties. And AIPAC felt at the time that if they broached the super PAC world and they started spending big against particular Democrats, then that would threaten this like bipartisan, patina that they still had going. And it would also kind of turn them into like a super PAC organization rather than more of the grassroots organization. Because you don't have to agree with them to say they are a grassroots organization. Like they have thousands and thousands.
Was just, saying something very similar on the show about how we could learn a lot from how grassroots they've been able to wrangle this thing. Yeah. No,
absolutely. And so they're worried they would undermine that. And so Mark Mellman, who'd done a lot of work for AIPAC, very close to AIPAC, led a lot of AIPAC's kind of work in Washington, went off and did his own thing and said, well, if it's going to make us look undemocratic, let's just put Democratic in the name. So it's the Democratic majority for Israel. And they were able to raise a decent amount of money, and the first person they ever attacked, as I'm sure you recall, was Bernie Sanders during the Iowa caucuses, with kind of a half-hearted. It was like a 6-figure spend, but they set the pattern there that they have followed through since, which is basically never talking about Israel. What they hit him on then, if you remember, were the ads that because of his heart attack, he was going to be a bad president. Doesn't have anything to, like, no Gaza, no West Bank, no. Here's why our candidate would be better on our issue, and Bernie Sanders is bad on this issue. And they've done that repeatedly. They just poll, they figure out what message hits hardest, and then they put millions of dollars behind that. And so that's where DMFI comes from. Yeah, that's why DMFI is the one that kind of is the tip of the spear rather than AIPAC.
Well, so you also write that, AIPAC's reputation, or perhaps even more directly, Israel's reputation, was struggling in the wake of some of these moments, whether it's the March of Return, whether it was events that happened a little after, I think, this in 2021.
And also the Iran deal.
The Iran deal, the AIPAC, along with funding from, what did you say, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Israel, lobbying to overturn Obama's biggest foreign policy accomplishment, that this didn't look good for Dems, that Dems didn't like that Dems see themselves as human rights oriented. Even if they support Israel, they don't want to see a bunch of dead or maimed Palestinians crossing their television screens. So the AIPAC brand was starting to get tarnished. And so that's why you needed a little bit of a separation from this group, DMFI. So you go on to write that, okay, they dabble in the Iowa caucus, but they don't really start to ramp things up until the next midterm cycle, where they start spending really heavily and really lay the groundwork for a pattern of behavior that you're going to see, marshaling their resources against specifically progressives and these are all going to be familiar names because we're all very familiar with these stories at this point. Senator Nina Turner was the first big example. State Senator Nina Turner, Congress member Nina Turner, precisely because of the DMFI ad spend. So we're familiar with that, but just for the detail of it, because nobody really knows the facts and the timing of how that spending came into play. Walk us through how she was polling at what time in the race before DMFI entered the picture, how much money she had versus Shantan Brown, her opponent, and then how and why everything started to change.
Yeah, and when she rolled out her campaign, she rolled it out with a whole bunch of local establishment endorsements, people who might not have supported what she was doing with Bernie Sanders, but they had known her as a state senator. They'd known her as a local activist for years, and they respected her and were willing to get behind her. And so you had those local establishment figures, local activist figures, national, obviously people like Bernie Sanders. She raises millions of dollars out of the gate. The polling is showing her 30 to 40 points ahead, and you've got a divided field as well. And so typically, for decades, any consultant kind of looks at that race and says, too bad, like that's it, it's done. Like it's basically impossible for somebody with that level of both establishment and progressive support, that amount of money, the access to that much more money coming down the road, that much name recognition, the fact that it's a special election, it's going to be a low turnout. Forget it. You cannot beat this person at this point. DMFI comes in with millions and says, no, maybe we can. And one reason I think and they end up actually, so May 2021, to put the timeline on there, is when one of the previous Gaza wars begins. And so that played a huge role because it also kind of galvanized the Jewish pro-Israel vote in that particular district. And there was this extremely impressive kind of organizing campaign in neighborhoods in the district that saw turnout in the primary exceed average turnout in the rest of the district by something like 10 times, like just absolutely blew it out of the water. And a lot of Republicans and independents, switched because in that primary they were able to switch. And
they were openly advocating for people to do so, calling around and saying, we've just got to stop Nina Turner.
And they would say,
she's against Israel.
She's endorsed.
Yeah.
The evidence for why you had to block Nina Turner is that she's endorsed by Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, and she says that she'll be a member of the squad. Like that. Mm-hmm. That was her. That was the whole argument, and there was no sense that there needed to be any further explanation after that. Like that's it. Mm-hmm. Like that's enough reason that we're going to take her out, and it shows how quickly that was resonating in that community. That there wasn't in the messages that were circulated, there was no sense that you needed more than that. Like Ilhan Omar, she likes Ilhan Omar. Ilhan Omar likes her. Rashida Tlaib likes her. She cannot go to Congress.
So that was enough of a pitch for a lot of people, but that certainly wasn't the extent of their pitch. There was, of course, this flowering campaign where the messaging was some of the most dishonest messaging I think I've ever seen.
Oh my God, yes. That was DMFI too.
Right. So they argued that because Nina Turner voted against the DNC platform because it was not progressive enough, that she did not support the progressive aspects of said platform, which she had fought to include in the first place, including a $15 minimum wage and
quote unquote universal health care. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Which we know the Democratic Party has been champions of since then.
They sent around mailers saying Nina Turner opposed $15 minimum wage and universal health care. Just one of the most shockingly dishonest things you could ever see. They also put up billboards and ran TV ads around the bowl of shit comment, which I think I would assume Nina would not have done if she thought there was going to be a special election in a few weeks later. When they hit Summer Lee late the next year, dropped millions of dollars on her. She only Nina loses by 4,000 votes.
Right.
Summer Lee won by just a few thousand votes. It's wild what the difference is by just a few thousand people, one direction or another. One of the things that saved Summer Lee, they could never find anything that landed like that. Like all of her criticisms were, you'd play her criticisms in an attack ad. You're like, that sounds reasonable. Or it would be
criticisms of Biden or
criticisms of Biden or the Democratic Party, because they're not talking about Israel. When it comes to ads, they don't care about Israel. They were looking for something that Summer Lee said that would have been brutal toward Joe Biden, while she was campaigning, say for Bernie Sanders, and they just couldn't find. She had criticized Biden at a lot of different times, but it was always the kind of criticism where it was sophisticated, to use a word, compared to bowl of shit, right? And so when you'd play it, I gotta
say though, I felt at the time, I will confess. So my grandmother lives in the district. My mom does now, but didn't then. And I went there to cover.
Or Nina Turner's.
I'm sorry?
Nina Turner's district?
Turner's.
Yeah.
Nina Turner's. And I went there during the summer of 2021. I saw the mailer stacked up at my grandmother's house. I saw the advertisements on TV. They were voluminous. I participated in some dialers for Nina Turner and encountered a not trivial number of people. I mean, you know how it is when you do those phone trees. You'll do it for an hour and maybe you'll get through to 3 people. But if 2 of those 3 people are saying absolutely not because of Israel, I'm going to take from that a little bit of a trend. Yeah. And I experienced all of that. And my feeling at the time, in the midst of my frustration, was that I like unsurprisingly, I like the half a bowl of shit comment. And I thought that there needed to be, instead of trying to run away from it, an embracing of the fact that my job is to fight for you in this community and not be best friends with Joe Biden to the extent that I think he's not delivering on his promises to you in this community, which is a predominantly Black community. There's many more Black people that live in Cleveland than Jewish people in Cleveland. The idea that she was kind of running away from that, given how much familiarity there was in the community and respect for Nina Turner there was in the community, I thought was a real reflection, frankly, of the power that DMFI has and the fear that it could strike in her. Because I think in any other circumstance, you would say, who are these people trying to create a wedge between me and my own home turf and my own community when we have numbers and we have people power? But it didn't seem to be even a consideration that one would kind of lean into the message and hope that turnout among Black people or anybody else in the district could overcome what DMFI was able to gin up.
Yeah, and I think she was in a uniquely tricky spot because of Biden's entire term. He had like just a few months where his popularity was significant.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And her primary landed like just in that spot. Like any other time, people are like, yeah, of course, it's like a bullshit or half a bullshit.
So it was right after the COVID, the American Rescue Plan.
American Rescue Plan had passed, $2 trillion in spending. Every country's opening up, everybody's happy. Like everybody loves Biden for like 5 minutes, and so she had the misfortune of like landing in that spot too. But maybe even then it still works. Like, and everything had to go right for DMFI to win that. So like there was so many different things came together.
I mean, the interest groups also, I attended a church service where it was like one of these big mega churches in Cleveland. And they had invited both Nina Turner and Shontel Brown. My understanding was that they had first invited Shontel Brown. There was some discussion about what was appropriate, whether they should be picking sides here. And then Nina Turner was also invited. They were both given an opportunity to speak, or maybe Nina Turner asked for an opportunity to speak. She spoke very compellingly, as we've all observed her. Yeah, she does. Shontel Brown, I would argue subjectively, less so. I did an episode about this with a lot of recording from those events. You can go back and listen to that, bad faith listeners.
I wouldn't want to have to speak next to Nina Turner on stage at a mega church.
Me either. No. I wouldn't want to say the alphabet back to back with Nina Turner saying the alphabet. But I remember there was the owner of a major sports team that was there in the audience, who was supporting Shontel Brown, who had previously donated to Donald Trump. And that seemed reflective of the quality of the interest that were rallying behind Shontel Brown. This really wasn't a issue of left-right partisanship. You had not only Republicans being urged to cross over and vote in this election, you had people who had been major Donald Trump donors who saw value in getting someone not named Nina Turner into that seat. Yeah,
and that gets you to the other kind of stool in that three-leg AIPAC, DMFI, and mainstream Democrats, they call themselves. It's basically Reid Hoffman's PAC, who's this kind of, his politics have been kind of winding, but he's wound up at a spot where he's just kind of anti-Trump at this point. He's a LinkedIn billionaire, so he's got enormous amounts of money to spend, and he landed on this theory that the squad needs to be eliminated because they make the rest of the Democratic Party unelectable because of the unpopular things they say, like defund the police and whatever, what have you. And so they came in with DMFI with huge amounts of money, and they basically are DMFI, as I report in the book. They share an office space, they share consultants. One of the top people at mainstream Democrats, Dimitri Mellon, told me that Mark Mellon does all of their targeting and their polling. So like Mark Mellon is the head of DMFI. And so it's one more organization that comes in up against them. And then obviously later you have old Sam Bankman-Fried even makes an appearance. That's when it's kind of like you throw your hands up and you're like, oh, Jesus Christ. Like this crypto money too.
Hey YouTube, thanks for watching. Just a reminder that this is a podcast. You can catch an extra premium episode every Monday for $5 a month at patreon.com/badfaithpodcast. That's patreon.com/badfaithpodcast for $5 a month, an extra episode every week. Additionally, please do consider liking this video, subscribing to this channel. It helps us out. It helps independent media beat the algorithm. We appreciate you. And as always, keep the faith.